Do you have fully vacant units on your property that you have mothballed until next semester? If you do, I bet you've thought to yourself, we should list those on Airbnb for game day weekends or for parents visiting their kids. Maybe you're in a college town like Austin or Raleigh or Tallahassee, and your city has large festivals and not enough hotel rooms. You know you could lease those units on a nightly or a weekly basis. Providing short-term rentals on platforms like Airbnb can provide a great source of ancillary income. But it takes it takes a lot of organization. There's the additional setup of providing linens and coffee makers and all the little things that a short-term tenant will expect. Then there's the regulatory and tax issues that could require additional work. More importantly, there's the time and labor to market on all the multiple platforms, handle the reservations and cancellations, the cleaning, and then there's the bookkeeping. All of this turns into a big distraction from the main job at hand, which is operating and leasing your property. That's where Vector Travel comes in. These guys know the short-term rental industry and they know how to relieve all of those burdens from the property manager. And best of all, they've become experts in how to do that with student properties. They understand the complexity of mixing travelers with college students. They know it so well, they can quickly identify if a student property is not going to be a good fit for their program. So if you have vacant units, reach out to Vector Travel and have them do a free, no obligation assessment to determine if enrolling your vacant units in their program will be beneficial. Go to vectorstays.com/SHI. Fill out a quick form to receive more information. You will also get the first month's service fee waived by going to that specific landing page. Again, that's vectorstays.com/SHI. Welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we are putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees. And joining me today for the first time in a very long time is one of our co-hosts, Gretta Dare. Gretta, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm so excited to be sitting across the computer from your voice. It's been a while. It has been a while.
That was the weirdest descriptor ever. Sitting across the computer from your voice.
Yeah, we typically don't use video for these podcast recordings. So
you're using video though, so there's a context here for everyone. I'm looking at Wes's face on a video, and he's been complaining at me for not turning my video on. Thus, why he is sitting across a computer from my voice.
Welcome to 2020. We sit at home.
Sir, we left 2020 in the past. We forgot about 2020. It never happened. This is 2021.
Yeah. We actually started this conversation an hour and a half ago, and I've been catching up about all the craziness that the world has turned into after 2020. So, but hey, you have had a lot of stuff happening through 2020 that I want to catch our audience up on, because there's a reason you haven't been involved with co-hosting over the past year, and that is you are now the president of Book and Ladder.
This is true. I am that indeed. That did happen.
And Book and Ladder, for those that have not heard, is a new student housing management. I shouldn't say student housing. I think you guys are getting involved with
conventional housing as well. Yeah. Property management company.
Tell us about Book and Ladder, Gretta.
So Book and Ladder, as mentioned, is a property management company. Technically, the legal entity name is Book and Ladder Collegiate Communities. And yes, it's property management done differently. And so I was asked to join the team in July of last year, I believe it was, and we just dove in head first, a new startup company. And I believe as of, I don't know, I think next week or the week we're at like 15 communities at this point, headed right around the corner. It'll be at 16 or 17.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a ride. So, yeah, it's incredible. I have the most amazing team I could possibly ask for, and that is that's an incredible statement considering all of the incredible people that I've been lucky enough to work with. So,
It's and you've brought in some key players here recently that I've even have gotten. Look, you stay around this industry for as long as I have, you end up knowing all the players, right? And so you brought a few folks on here recently that I know are just thrilled to be joining, and it's cool watching this team come together. So congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, you sent me one of my gods sent. You sent me Miller, man. That was
Yeah,
I
Smart
couldn't
Miller.
possibly have asked for more. That was luck. That was absolute luck. So thank you for that.
Well, it's good getting good people together, and excited for you guys. I know you guys you're currently still in Charlotte, but I think the plan
Correct.
is to move to Dallas.
That is the plan. Yes, we will be putting the property management office in a really fantastic location in the Dallas, well, in the Dallas location, but it is Plano, like Plano Frisco area, essentially. Yeah.
So. Exciting stuff.
Yes, sir.
So looking forward to all the good things that are going to come out of that. But you didn't, we never took you off the website. We still had our phone calls, even though they were,
more scattered.
Far less frequent, but which is probably one of the reasons we talked for so long before starting this intro. So, but anyway, thanks for catching us up. And, I'm sure there are folks that are out there listening saying, oh, I either know Gretta from this or from some other prior work experience, or they know you from the podcast, and I know you guys are looking for, good people. If there's a way that they can get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Listen, you all, if you are looking for an amazing company to come work, or you just are really excited to potentially come work with me because you just can't seem to get enough of my annoying opinions and voice, if for some reason you're crazy like that, I love you for it. You are more than welcome to just email me directly at Gretta at bookin, the letter N, ladder.com, LADDER. Otherwise, you can go straight to our website at bookandladderpm.com and go contact us. That's an option too. You can also find us on LinkedIn. I feel like I just did an advertisement. Thank you. Contact us at bookandladder.com. Side effects may include awesomeness.
Well, hey, so on today's episode, we are actually I'm playing an interview from our MEMO web series back in March. Actually, that started in February, but this particular episode was at the beginning of March and was part of our motivation and leadership insights. And it was with Willie Butler, who's also one of our co-hosts. For those of you guys that may not know who Willie is, he is the co-founder, along with Victoria Inchill, with Empower Property Management Consultants. But he also wrote a book a couple of years ago. Actually, it's been exactly 2 years ago this August since it came out, called Releasing, Counterintuitive Approach to Leasing. And that is kind of where I first met Willie. He sent me a copy of the book that, it wasn't a completed copy. I think it was just like one chapter. And at the time he was working at Asset Living, and he said, hey, I've heard your voice. I like what you're doing. I would really like to get your opinion on, on this book that I'm working on. And I was just like, went through that sample chapter that he sent me. And I was like, this guy gets it. I want to make sure that we help him with this thing. And so he launched the book in 2019, and it was very well received within student housing. It's the only book that you'll find out there that is that's wrote from a perspective of student housing that can be really used for anything. If someone's in a sales leadership role, but obviously, student housing is Willie's background, and so it's written from that perspective, and because of that, it resonates so much, especially with folks at the kind of general manager, community manager, leasing manager role at a lot of the student housing sites that are out there. So Anyway, you got to see this, Greta, and I kind of want to get what were some of your takeaways?
So to me, there were a couple of things. One, we've talked about the fact that there's a lot of training that we're still lacking in the student housing industry, as much as I hate to say that. But it is true. And I think that a lot of people know that. But one of the things that, yes, sales, yes, customer service, but absolutely management and leadership. And I think that this is more than just a management webinar or a day of leadership training or a week seminar or something like that. This is something that we really need to ensure that if we're promoting somebody into like a leasing manager or a leasing and marketing manager role, that they're learning they're not taking that role just because they're good at leasing or great at leasing, because I can honestly say that that's why I was put into that role, because I was just great at leasing, but that we're showing them how to teach others how to be great at it, that they're great at empowering others, that they're inspiring others, they're motivating the rest of the team to be great. Because I think that, like Willie talks about in this interview, is that not only at that role and the manager role, but then also in a corporate role, and I want to talk about that in a second, that we have this really bad tendency to actually kind of be like the bad parents, where we expect you to do things because of the role that I'm now in, that I carry this title and you need to either do it and respect me because I said so, or fear the loss of your job or fear a write-up. And that isn't how we get anywhere. People need to, as humans, we know this. As humans, you're going to get so much out of your team through the inspiration of wanting, the desire to be great. And we should want people to want to do that. And so some people are just naturally that great at it, and some people will self-teach them. But if we want our properties to be the self-generating or revenue generators that they have the capability of being, regardless of whether or not they're C, B, or A properties, they all have that capability with incredible teams. And that means that we do need to spend more time helping our teams be incredible. And then on top of that, it isn't just the leasing managers that need this. This is also our community managers and them offering that support and guidance. But it's up to us to have that training program in place to be able to empower them. And then also at the corporate level. And this is something that gets me so profusely. It's something where I've seen this so many times, where you have senior managers, you have directors, you have VPs who are in these roles, and they have this expectation that they show up on site and I'm here and you need to impress me. Everything should look perfect. And I'm here, like, you need to give me all of your attention. And it's like, or you need to do this because I said so, or like this command of respect because of my title. And again, I have that same expectation of inspire and empower people to be great. And that is actually your role and responsibility. And in fact, I feel like the higher you go in a company, the more responsible you are for that. And that needs to be taken very, very seriously. And if you aren't great at that, then it's really difficult for that expectation to roll downhill, because it isn't, there's that saying, and I don't love the saying. I'm just going to call it the snowball effect. Actually, I'm not going to say the saying where things roll downhill. Great things should roll downhill. Everything else should stop before it goes down, besides greatness. And so that inspiration should roll down, that wonderful should roll down, and nothing else. And I feel like we don't see that enough. But the last thing that I thought about, and I brought this up, or I'm going to bring this up right now, because of the fact that you're talking about right now how, we went all of this time and I'm still here and I'm still your co-host, and it's here we are, and we have been together in this interaction for, I don't even know how many years now. And I remember writing, the stuff for his SHI however many years ago. And
it's been 3 years now
that we've been doing SHI.
Well, it's been since 2017. The podcast launched in August of 2017. So it's right at 4 years.
Okay.
4 years this August. It's pretty amazing.
So then you and I have been doing this for being Greta and Wes for 6, 7.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something. Yeah. So here's the thing that I find interesting about that is that, so for those who don't know, so obviously Wes was my COO at a company that we worked at before. And obviously, like we said, I'm still here. And one of the things that anyone who knows me and knows Wes, one of the things that I always say, I'm like, here's the thing about Wes. I know I'm the co-host of the podcast. And when he first asked me, and I was just like, absolutely not. I don't want to. I'm like, but here's the thing. Wes will talk me into anything that he is doing. It doesn't matter what it is. Like if he's like, I just end up all going along with it, like regardless of circumstance. But that's the thing. And it's always been that way. And this has been the relationship. This is the way that it's always been. And it started because back when we did work together, there was great leadership that was there. And we all loved our team. We were all inspired to work hard, to be great, and to show up no matter how difficult or how hard the job was going to be. And that shows because I'm still here, no matter what the circumstance. And that's the way that we do need to be. We need to have those people that follow us for years and years and years and never want to stop being in contact with us and never want to stop being a part of our projects because they loved us right from the beginning. And that's the way that it is supposed to be. And that's when you know that you're doing something right. And I think that is a key takeaway. I think it's incredibly important, especially as we're about to go into turn and we are about to ask we ask the most from our teams right as we're going into the summer months. The majority of the students are gone. We're still pushing for leasing, especially after we're still at the end of the pandemic. And so many of us are behind in our year-over-year numbers. And we have investors and shareholders and banks and whomever it is, they're still begging us for numbers. And we're still pleading for this to happen. But then we're also getting all of our turn schedules and everything figured out. And then we're about to go in and we'll be like, we know that we just pushed for all of these leasing numbers, but hey, get ready for your 12 and 16 hours where you're going to be moving furnitures and doing trash outs. And just, we're about to ask for so much. So please just remember that you have to stand and the bullets have to hit you from behind because nothing can roll downhill except for that inspiration, except for that greatness. And nobody at the team site level is going to do that for their teams and create and generate that greatness if you aren't doing it for them in the first place. And right now it's crucial. It could not possibly be more important.
Yeah.
And
it's such a good point. And yes, thank you for those kind words, and thank you for following me sometimes blindly and maybe even unwillingly, because you've been an integral part of me not only setting up Student Housing Insight but also Providential Student Housing. And there's not just the website, but especially early on, you were part of the team. You were one of the folks that I was contracting with on for particular projects, and you've been absolutely invaluable. And that's why I know, no matter where you go, you're going to do amazing things. And so,
thanks, man.
But yeah, I mean, this is why I held this particular recording for MEMO back, because I've been releasing them about a month after they aired on MEMO, but I held this one back because you would think with Willie, this is going to be, something really focused on leasing and that type of thing. And it is, we're in our last stride, this is coming out in mid-June. And so we're kind of in our last stride of our pre-leasing efforts and that type of thing. But this is, a period of the year where it's either time to be promoted or be exposed, right? As a leader. And that's not just because of turn and move in happening, but this is also the time when there's a lot of changes that are happening. Properties are, being teed up to be sold. And, you've got those properties that didn't get leased up. Maybe there was a leadership problem. And I know someone that I'm kind of working with, that just came into a GM position or a lead property manager site position, that the property hasn't been leasing up well, and he's he is a strong sales leasing person, and so he's only been there for a week and a half, and was kind of there were some quick changes that happened just within the timing that he's been there, but he's used to it being so much more. And we had a long conversation about it, and just making sure his head was in the right place, and he was thinking about what's ahead of him for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And I'm sure he's listening to this podcast because I told him it was coming out. I was like, you really got to listen to this. And for that person, you know who you are. I think there's a lot of folks that are out there right now that have taken on a new property, and or you've recently been promoted, and now you've got this leadership thing on top of you, and not just this production part. Production being cranking out leases and getting traffic in the door and that type of thing. But now you've got people that are going to be. They are very dependent on you to make sure that not only are they getting the right direction, but they're also getting the right motivation. And so I think this is kind of a perfect timing for everybody to listen to this and kind of have a reality check of what's important right now. So any other thoughts before we cut to the interview?
I think if there was a soundtrack to this, it would be The General by Dispatch. Listen, I could not bring up the song, man. I can't not bring up the song.
Yeah, I'll have to see if there's I think I can only bring up 9 seconds in order for Apple Podcast to not mark it as.
It's funny. I was actually thinking about this. I wonder how many people in this are actually going to get that reference.
Yeah.
It's a great song.
Go download it. I'm not sure I can play it. And this podcast is being sponsored by Vector Travel. If you're going to have some some vacancy coming up this next year, and you'd like to use it for short-term rentals, please get in touch with the folks at Vector Travel. They can turn that vacancy into something income producing.
Yeah, and there's a great podcast that is on here that breaks down and has great questions and answers on what exactly it is that Vector Travel does if you're unfamiliar with it, because right now a lot of people are dealing with vacancies. Just go get all of your questions answered and use it, because it's going to solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, that was before they were ever a sponsor. I was just so enthralled with what they were doing, and I'm not just a spokesperson, but I'm also a client, and I use them.
Also sponsored by the Men's Warehouse.
I also use them.
Oh wait, no, that's not the Men's Warehouse.
No,
what was that? That was the hair club. Hair club for men.
Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty. It was pretty amazing having them. I think we had 3 fully vacant units at a property that, and actually through 2020, I was like, oh shoot, nobody's going to be traveling, but so many people, and we ended up doing so much better because, one, the hotels that were open, people were a little bit more scared of going to hotels versus, a short-term rental type of situation. And yeah, we did fantastic.
Well, and a lot of people are moving away from enjoying hotels. Honestly, that's been the feedback that I've heard from a lot of places. So, or just from a lot of people in general. I don't even like staying in hotels anymore. And you know how much I travel. Well,
hey, coming from the guy who I just share this about my family with the podcast family, our AC that was 9 years old finally kicked the bucket last week, and so I had my entire family in a hotel room for 5 nights.
You guys did that in one hotel room?
Yeah. Fortunately, it was the first night was at Spring Hill Suites or whatever. And
I love Spring Hill.
So we had plenty of room. And then the new Hilton Honda Suites is where we were at.
Those are legit.
4 nights. That was, Yeah, we had a full kitchen. It was, I mean, we were crowded. It was kind of like, I've yet to venture into buying an RV. It's actually something I want to do.
For those who don't know, Wes has like 9 million kids, at least from my perspective.
I have 4 kids aged from 5 to 15. So right now is not the right time. Yeah, right now is not the right time to get an RV. But that was pretty much what it felt like. It felt like a pretty good size RV, right? And it was good. It allowed us to have a lot of discussions as a family that we don't necessarily have when we're in our house and everybody has their own bedroom to escape to. That kind of stuff. But yeah, it's hotels are nice, but they're not the greatest. But anyway,
it's not. So yeah, fun.
Call Vector Travel.
Yes.
All right, let's cut to this interview.
We're jumping back into motivation and leadership insights with another author, the author of Releasing, a counterintuitive approach to apartment leasing. This is the only book you're going to find out there that is about student housing, and it is written by our very own co-host, and that is Willie Butler. And this is also probably the only book you'll ever see an endorsement for me on the back of. So Willie sent me a section of this when he was writing it, and I was just kind of blown away that I think this guy actually gets it. And so I was happy to go out on a limb and endorse him for this, and it's been great. And if you haven't read it, this came out in summer of 2019. There was a big promotion going on when it happened. If you haven't got the book, if you're new to student housing, this has got some great tactics in it, and it's really through those tactics that there's a lot of leadership that can be gained and a lot of leadership insights. So that's the main reason I wanted to bring Willie on today. But you could go out and get this on Amazon, and you know how Amazon works. It's just a couple of days before you can get it. But I would get this into your hands, your leasing staff hands. It's an incredible asset to have on your property. But let's go ahead and get into it. Willie, welcome to MEMO. How are you doing, man?
Oh, man, I'm doing fantastic, Wes. Thank you for having me. Crazy excited to be talking about this concept and talking about releasing. Man, by far, by and large, my favorite book. I don't know, something about me and the author. We just get each other.
I bet so. Well, hey, Willie, your student housing career up until 2019 is pretty similar to most people in the industry. You know, you were a college kid in Washington looking for a job. You started leasing for a new property. You had some success. You had some failures, and we'll get into, talking about how you overcame those. And you learned from those failures.
Absolutely.
And moving from that, you got some promotions, heading up that corporate ladder. And 2019, when you probably could have gone and worked for any student housing company in the country, at that corporate level, a director of leasing, a director of training, all these positions that when we start out on site and we start to understand the industry and kind of where we can go, everybody's kind of aspiring to get to that level. And, anybody else that was in your position in 2019 would have been looking to, where they were going to take their talents to. But no, you decided to write a book and really share those lessons learned. And I think more than anything, just encourage people to get a new perspective. And obviously that led to you starting your own company. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we go through this. But you and I, we met early in 2019. You were telling me about this book, as I was mentioning, and sent me a sample. And like I said, it was like somebody finally gets this and understands that, it's not just about, coming in, checking the boxes, doing the things, getting things leased up. It's really about helping your team out. And I want to get into that. And why I think this is really so important is because when we start talking about this industry, especially purpose-built student housing, off-campus housing specifically. We've had so much growth over the past 10, 20 years that a lot of folks, myself included, moved up and were promoted very fast. Yep. And, I was fortunate in my situation where I got to work for a small company, and I kind of got to see everything cradle to grave because of that. And, but I see a lot of other folks that are out there that are working for these larger companies, and they kind of get lost in that shuffle, but they get this quick, promotion from CA to leasing agent to full-time leasing agent to, leasing manager and general manager, sometimes within, a short 2 years, coming right out of college, right?
If that, yeah.
If that, you're exactly right. And, I think because of that, there's obviously a lack of fully understanding property operations, how a decision in 2021 is going to impact operations in 2023. Yeah. There's a lack of understanding of market dynamics, right? What makes one market different from another market. But most importantly, there's just this huge lack of leadership and team building skills that I think is so important. And
I agree.
That concerns me because, if you can't lead a team, you're never going to get to a point of understanding property operations and market dynamics. So that's what I really wanted to dive into with you, because you talk a lot about leadership in your book. Yeah, there's a lot of tactics that you go over as well, and it's so many little nuggets, man. I mean, I've read it twice now. Read it, shortly after you sent it, or after you gave me a signed copy of it, and then in preparing for this, I picked it up just to read a few things, and then I ended up probably reading about half of the book again. And I kept, finding little things that I was like, oh yeah, we need to do that. We need to do that. So there's a lot of that, but in that process, you really start understanding what it takes to be a leader, and in this industry. And, and you say in the book, and I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, being a manager is easy. Being a leader is difficult. And, just want to ask you, what characteristics do managers need to have in order to be considered a leader? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And it's funny because when you ask that question, and it immediately takes me to a place to reflect on what Simon Sinek once said. I think he said, being a leader is not about being in charge. It's about looking out for those in your charge. Right. And it takes me to reflect on my very first property as a leasing manager that I had the opportunity to be a leasing manager for. Coincidentally, it was actually the same property that I was a community assistant before I had transferred universities. Right. So, awesome. I don't know how I ended up getting the sales manager job, because I had absolutely no sales experience prior. But, for some reason, I still don't know to this day, they took a shot on me. Right. But with that lack of experience came lack of results, especially more immediately. Right. I found myself on countless underperformance calls. I'm getting reprimanded left and right. So knowing that my window was very slim, I don't have the experience. I clearly don't have the tact, right? Like it's just, it's just not there. Right. So I started trying to figure it all out. I start watching all the different sales movies, reading all the different books that I can, grab my hand or get my hands on. I'm calling all the other leasing managers in the portfolio. Like, dude, how are you finding success? How can you help me out? Like I'm doing anything and everything that I can, but I met failure after failure after failure. Until one day, my area sales manager, she ended up coming down with a fleet of corporate employees, which to me as a new,
don't you love that?
Yeah. And oh my God, I felt like the SWAT team that came in, but it was literally like 2 or 3 people. But to me as a brand new employee, oh my God, my heart was jumping out of my chest. Because essentially they were just going down the box, checking off everything that we were doing wrong, ripping down all the weird, like the motivational posters and stuff that we have on the wall. And like we had this like selfie wall for all of our employees. It came and ripped that down because of course that's why we weren't signing leases. All of these different I mean, basically they just came and repositioned our whole office. And then all at once, my area sales manager sat down with me and said, Willie, if you don't do your job, I'll find somebody who will.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was huge, right? Because like, I can only imagine anyone else in that situation. I can imagine that's tough to hear, right? Basically, your boss, the person that you're reporting to, the person that's supposed to be your mentor, your leader, your team lead, they're basically telling you you're dispensable. We don't need you, right? And if you don't do it, I'll find somebody else who will. What does that do to the employee, right? Easily, you could start to get discouraged, and you can start questioning your worth with a company. You start, if I'm not needed here, somebody else may need me, right? It's easy to kind of detach yourself, because that's a visceral feeling, right? You can't really talk back. I wanted to, but I had to help hold my tongue, right? But for me, it was a little bit more motivating, because now I had somebody to prove wrong, right? I took it as offensive, or like I took offense to it and was like, you know what? Fine. If you're going to fire me, go ahead and fire me. But fire me, you're not going to fire me for being somebody who was just sitting around watching things happen and not making things happen, right? You're not going to fire me for, somebody who was sitting around counting the minutes and not making the minutes count. Like, if you're going to fire me, you're going to know that I went out there and I did anything and everything that I can to fill this property up the way that I can, like the only way that I know how, because everything else I'm trying isn't working, right? And telling that story makes me reflect on like what I know management versus leadership to be, right? And I'm only one guy. And in my opinion, I say management is easy. It's easy to come in and use your status, use your position and your title, and, kind of as a fear tactic to light a fire under somebody's butt. Like, hey, go out there and get this done, or I can find somebody else who will do it, right?
Yeah.
If you don't do your job, I'll find somebody who will. But it's another thing to be able to light a fire underneath or like within somebody, right? Light the fire as big as an Olympic flame inside somebody to motivate them to want to work even outside of your watch, right? Because as a manager, yeah, you scared me. I know that you control my next paycheck. I know that you're controlling my next meal, right? So while you're in my face, I'm going to work hard and I'm going to give you everything that I have. But when you turn your back, yep, I'm going to do what I want to do, right? But as a leader, right, if you can find something that makes me tick and motivate me into working that much harder, because there's some self-investment there now, right? Like, I have something attached to it. I know that you care about me and I don't want to let you down. I'm going to work a little bit harder. I'm going to have a different driving force. So I think leadership's a little bit harder because it takes intention, right? And I think the greatest form of like influence, the number one rule to it, is allowing yourself to be influenced as well by the person that, like, reaching out to somebody with the intent of allowing them to influence you, learn that person and be able to make that tick, right? So some characteristics, sorry, I'm going on a little soapbox, Wes, but characteristics of leadership to me. If you were to ask me, I'm going to give it to you as quick as possible. 5 good characteristics that I like to focus on. 3 of them I wrote in the book is humility, empathy, and authenticity. But on top of that, I'm really big about servantship, as well as your ability to embrace loss, right? And I'll start with those 2. Servantship, it's funny because I used to call my team the Avengers, right? And because it takes me to this place because I've been watching WandaVision recently. And if you haven't watched that, take the time. It's worth it, right?
Yeah. I'll go ahead and warn everybody. The first couple of episodes, you're like, what is this? I don't get this. But
yeah, right.
After the first 2 episodes, it gets pretty good.
There's a twist. Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what happened. I had stopped midway after the first episode. And then one of the community assistants that I'm working with, we're working with, right? They were like, hey, keep watching it. It's awesome. Just fight through the first episode. And I did. And it completely, like, circling back to your question, it took me back to how I used to call my team the Avengers, right? And the Avengers in the sense that I would be Captain America, right? But, all the rest of my team, they're still out there. And it's funny because, yes, I knew my team, and I would know when I needed a Hulk to go smash things. And I knew when I needed a Black Widow to, kind of finesse and use her attack to do things, right? And yes, I'm pointing my team in different directions, But it's not like Captain America's not down there fighting as well. He's just fighting his fight. He's not just aimlessly delegating so that he can sit in an office and push a few papers, right? He's doing things with his team in the trenches, in the mud, essentially, making it happen with his team, right? And that's essentially, that was my management style when I was on site. Yes, I'm going to ask you to do things, but it's solely so that we can push the needle together. But that servantship, your team seeing you down there fighting with them, signing the next lease, doing the follow-up calls, it shows that you're not above those small tasks. The small things that make a huge impact, right? You're not above that. And it gives them a certain level of hunger, a certain level of attachment to it as well. They want to work a little bit harder. 2, your ability to be okay with the lose, right? Like being, I guess you're not afraid of loss. Right. I hear oftentimes people say it's a fear of failure, but a lot of times that fear of failure stifles your growth, because I'm a firm believer in this. When you win at something, you win because of something that you already know. Now that's good. That's awesome. Right. Because in that win, any level of success leaves a pattern. Right. So you can learn from that success and continue to implement those same strategies and find those wins. Right. If this worked here, keep on doing it. Right. It's yielding traffic, and that traffic is yielding leases. Awesome. But when you lose because of something you don't know. But the good thing about that loss, I guess, and the only way you can consider it a loss is if you didn't learn a lesson from it. That's my next point. You get to learn something from it. And in that learning, you get to grow, and make yourself that much better. Right. So, and in that growing process, now you have the opportunity to teach your team as well. And you guys are all growing together. And I think it's huge. And it leads to my next point of humility. Just being humble enough to say, hey, my processes are not perfect, and there's always room for improvement, and recognizing that anybody on your team can bring in something that can completely change the trajectory of your leasing season, right? But just because this is the way that you have been operating doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it that way every single time. This industry changes every single year. Let's look at where we are now compared to COVID. Just completely shifted everything that we do, right? So It's constantly changing. You just have to be nimble enough and, humble enough to be able to accept that change and recognize that your processes are not perfect. Number 4 here, empathy. Noticing that your team and who you're talking to, there's no cookie cutter approach to managing a team or cookie cutter approach to motivating and inspiring any person, right? You can't it's training, motivation, mentorship is not just a check the box kind of thing. You can't just put together a training and sit them in front of a computer and tell them now that you trained them or you motivated them. No, you have to get to know that person. Allow yourself to step outside of your shoes and your agenda and figure out what makes your team tick and what's their motivating force, because that's what's going to make them work off the clock or work because they have some attachment there. And then last but not least, authenticity, man. It's something to be said to, allow your team to see the real you and not necessarily just, putting together your casual Fridays and your, all these random things to build the culture or try to create a culture. It's, thoroughly letting them see you and letting them know who you are and just truly just caring about them, right? I can't emphasize it enough, man. You have to care about your team. You have to, and back to my point earlier, right? It's about taking care of your people. Human capital, I would say, is the biggest line item on your budget, right? It's huge. You have to invest in your people.
Yeah. That was a great way to summarize it. I love those 5 points. That's perfect. And, when you're talking about empathy and you're talking about, getting to know your employees, that kind of leads me to the next question I wanted to ask you. In chapter 2 of the book, you've got a section in there titled, I believe it's relationships outside of the workplace. And
absolutely,
you talk about the investment into knowing your team outside of the office. And it's really about understanding what, motivates your teams, not from hey, I've got to figure out how to motivate them so I can, be more successful. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But really from a pure sense of you want to better that person. And that's why, you need to do that. But you tell a story about, when you were in high school and your brother passed away from cancer. He was pretty much the parent for you and your younger sister. So, This ultimately led to you guys being split up. But you talk, and I'd love for you to get into that story if you feel comfortable sharing that as well. Of course, you go into details in the book about it as well. But you talk about your math teacher who basically, took you under his wing. And, I think a lot of people may look at that situation today and kind of condemn the teacher. You're constantly hearing about those type of things. But, his attention was really pure, as we were talking about. And, it provided a huge impact on your life.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of site and regional level managers, they feel like they've got to put up these walls between, their work life and the personal life. I think you put it, between work and life, and I love how you do that. But you advise really strongly against putting up those walls, and I just want to, if you could share with us a little bit as to why you feel that way.
Yeah. And to your point, Wes, about Peter, it's funny because I write Patrick in the book for the sake of anonymity, but cat's out the bag now, right? Peter was my guy. Why? Because like you discussed, it was a really tough time in my life. And, naturally I was going, and naturally like my behavior as a sophomore in high school, it started to reflect that, right? Because, growing up, there was, very early, we had to establish our Fantastic Four, right? My older brother, his twin brother, right? Myself and my little sister, right? And this is what we knew, right? And everything, like I knew my big brother to be the guy that where I used to get bullied at school, right? And when I would come home crying, he would pick my head up and say, "What are you crying for? Crying doesn't fix things. Doing fixes things." And he'll go out and bully the same bullies that bullied me. Or right when I got in trouble for some reason as a kid, I thought that the way to turn off the lamplight in our attic was to throw a shirt over it, right? Throw a shirt over it. The thing torches, right? And my brother, instead of ratting me out and pointing me out and saying it was Willie, right? Like, he shut up and we all got in trouble for it. He knew it was me, right? But he wanted to protect that, right? Still to this day, my grandpa doesn't know it was me, right? But, it's funny because in all aspects of it, he was my Superman, right? And when I got the phone call, or when we knew that my brother was diagnosed, it was like watching my Superman meet his kryptonite. And it was tough, right? And naturally, in high school, right, you have a reputation to hold up, and I'm always this funny, kind of cool kid, and especially in high school, you overvalue the opinion of other people, right? Yeah. It's just one of those things. Homecoming kings and queens and prom king, that whole thing, right? So, sure enough, I'm in class, and naturally my temper is a little bit shorter and my attention span's a little bit shorter. This guy's watching me spiral into God knows where. And he immediately steps in. Selfless, just complete altruistic act, right? He absolutely had nothing to gain from it except for the fact that he recognized me as being a smart kid, right? He said, "You're one of my brightest students." Not necessarily just because I knew the curriculum, but he just seen potential in me. So much so, instead of letting me go home to like a temporary home because my brother passed away and, we had been evicted and we literally have no place to live, sitting on the couch. So I didn't have a place to really study and focus on school. So my mentor allowed me, he stayed extra hours after class to, allow me a space to study and allow me a space to work, right? Whenever I would hit certain milestones, he wouldn't hesitate to take me out to eat, right? He made me the TA for the class so that not only was I able to learn the craft, but I was actually able to help teach it, right? Which further embedded in it. Like it further invested in me, but he never hesitated to sit down and actually talk to me about life and how things were really going, right? And that was huge to me because now he had this way of knowing me as a person beyond the curriculum, beyond everything that was going on. And why do I say there has to be, the whole concept of separating work from life and having that personal relationship is like if your job is to motivate and inspire your staff and lead your team and be a mentor to your team, right? How do you go about doing that if you don't know them, right? This whole relationship that Peter had with me it allowed him to get to know me and figure out what was motivating me, what was my driving force, what made me tick, not what makes a student tick, or, like, he got to know me. And he was able to further influence me into a more positive path, right? Honestly, if it wasn't for that engagement, I wouldn't be where I am today. But, it's wild because a lot of times we'll look at our staff and we'll put them in front of a computer. We'll sit them down and have them do a training. And that's kind of the root of it. And then we just completely turn them off. We're not friends. You're my employee. We can't go out and eat. We're not going to go drink. Like, we're not going to do anything outside of this office. The basis of your relationship is a lead coming in the pipeline and, closing a lease, right? Like, how do you motivate somebody if you don't know that somebody?
Yeah.
And I think it's just completely invaluable to your process. Is completely invaluable to any level of leadership to get to know your people, right? I said it earlier. I'll say it again. Human capital, man. You have to invest in your team. You have to invest in your people and take care of your people because they're going to take care of you. But again, there's no one size fits all approach to that, right? You have to take the time to get to know them for who they are. And it can go a long way. And it's wild because that same template, and, I'll give you a short version of it. That same template applies now 15 years later when I took my nephew out to urban air out here in Houston to go at the trampoline park. Right afterwards, we sat down on my car, underneath the stars and, was just sitting there talking. And the kid said, "Uncle, you know why I like you?" I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because you take the time to listen to me." Right. And it's funny because both the teachers at the school are always so infatuated with how I'm able to motivate the kid to do certain things. Or even his mom is like, he listens to you a lot more. Like, why is it that, you can get him to do this? Right. And the kid is telling you, he's like, because he listens to me, right? He knows me. And it could just go a long way to just get to know your team.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you're still taking him to urban air because you mentioned in the book, I think one of the, maybe even in the same chapter that, that was the way you got him to, there was a period of time where you moved in with your sister and you were, being a bit of that father figure and older brother all wrapped into one to your nephew. And that's what you use to motivate him. So I was
Extreme cool Arena. He came and shot me in my face with the Nerf gun. It's my payment.
Well, hey, you talked about the attributes or the characteristics of a leader. You talked about how to motivate others. I want to talk a little bit, about self-motivation because, I've seen you in your current position where you're going from, property to property to do a lease up. You may be there a month, you may be there 6 months. But it's really there to spark things, get the team focused, sometimes maybe even, hiring the team. And then you're off to the next assignment. And you are just so methodic, in how you hit a market and you get things going. And some people, me, look at what, you've been doing with Empower Property Management Consulting and, just say, wow, Willie you must have been a part of a company that really spent a lot of time training you and that type of thing. But, you mentioned in the book that in your first lease up in Michigan, you landed on the ground thousands of miles away from home and from where you've had all of your success at with, no training, no template on how to get things up and going. You literally ended up writing the template that you use now. So I want to go back to that first assignment in Michigan and, you don't know anyone
back there.
Yeah. You don't know anyone. You don't know the campus. That had to take a lot of motivation. What got you through that?
Oh man. Well, first and foremost, Michigan was very unique. Unique in the fact that I just never really experienced like that. Nothing wrong with the city, but man, it was cold, right? Like it was just different, man. Especially like they have this lake effect weather, and that lake effect hits every season, right? And you'll see all 4 seasons in Allendale, but in the wintertime, it's below zero. It's crazy cold, but you also get that lake effect wind that comes and it's piercing, like literally. Oh my God. It's ridiculous. Right. But it's funny because,
by the way, people in Houston know what that feels like now.
Yeah, now we do.
To do with it.
Yeah, it was rough, man. It was tough. But first getting down there, and it's funny because, again, I was at the Texas Student Housing Leasing Conference, or Texas Student Housing Conference, just this past week, and I had the opportunity to be a moderator for one of the panels, and I opened up the segment with this question, right? I just asked straight out, what is your superpower, right? Kind of that invisible, intangible goal, like superpower of yours that makes you kind of good at what you do without necessarily being your job title, right? Whether you're business development, superpower is probably not business development. It's maybe your ability to build rapport and talk to people, right? Mine, if I had to say anything and answer that question, it's, I would say I have impenetrable skin, right? Like really tough skin, right? In the sense that I have this ability to adapt to circumstances. And I found myself in a place where now I chase uncomfortability. Being comfortable, I always used to preach, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, right? Because it's in that time of discomfort that you experience the most growth. And I like to chase those moments because it allows me to problem solve and fix certain things. For example, in that Michigan situation, right, where nothing was going right? Murphy's Law at its finest, right? The leasing office was delayed getting put together. When it was put together, we ran into issues with plumbing and, water. We're in a trailer, right? So that's an issue, right? We're crazy far away from or not crazy far away, but a lot further away than a lot of our competition. Our floor plans are a lot smaller. Our price points are a lot higher. Also, the market that we are in, typically didn't get above 80% at that point, right? So, it was going to be a shark tank of a market, and we had to be the one property that held our head above water. How are we going to go out there and do it, right? It seemed like all odds were against me when I went to go out and talk to some of the other property management or properties. The managers were like, dude, I don't know why you guys are not only building one phase, but 2 new phases. That's crazy. That's nonsense, right? Like you guys are lunatics. It's not going to work. Naturally, I started to go in that direction as well. But, at that point, it was just like, at what point are you going to stop letting what others can't do define what you can do? Like, at what point are you going to be stronger than your strongest excuse, right? Like, they didn't send me down here to make excuses. They sent me down here to make change, make something happen, right? So in the way of like self-motivation, and back to your question, right? It was what motivates me.
Well, yeah. I mean, what's kind of that, when you're thrown into a situation, what is it that you're able to dial into for that self-motivation that you need?
Absolutely.
I think is probably the best way to put it, because I see you do it every, at least 3 or 4 times a year, right? Where you're just completely thrown into, a fish out of water type of situation.
Absolutely.
And, you end up conquering it. So
absolutely.
And I gotta imagine that takes a lot of self-motivation.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing, what I would associate it with is, yes, self-motivation, but sometimes it takes stepping outside of yourself, right? Because if a lot of whenever something is solely, it's a selfish act, right? We're going to hit a wall naturally. Like we all have our burnout. We all hit those moments where it's like, I can't push past it. I just want to quit. I just want to give up. This is too hard, right? But if your driving force is solely about you, if you're the only thing that is motivating you, then when you're down like that, it's going to be really hard to get back up, right? There's nothing else attached to it. But when you see that it's bigger than you, when somebody else can benefit from it, like when you have a driving force, it's no longer simply about you and self-investment, you tend to work a little bit harder, right? These students are depending on me. This owner is depending on me. They trusted me, right? I'm doing this for Wes. Wes is my guy, right? Like, you tend to work a little bit harder when, somebody else is depending on you. And I say all that I don't know. At least for me, right? When your driving force is something bigger than you, it gives you that second wind when you do hit a wall, right? So, and that's kind of the basis of, you mentioned Empower earlier, basis of Empower, right? It's at the sole purpose of it. We want to be able to empower you guys. We want to be able to leave you guys better than how we found you when we come down to help you guys out with these properties, right? I always tell people, if, we meet this same situation next year, then we completely failed you. I want to be able to be in a place where we're down and we're able to motivate your team. We're able to empower your team. We're able to inspire them to be able to find success long after our 60-day window is done. Right. So it's about attaching yourself to something that's bigger than you and working hard to accomplish that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about culture, because you talk about that in the book as well. And we've talked a lot on the podcast about, building company culture, and there are, some great companies within our industry who, have been very deliberate and intentional about their company's culture. But, we've also said that each individual staff, site staff, has its own distinct culture. Just like, the site manager is the CEO of the property, they're also the ones that have to spearhead that, kind of microculture of their site. And what do I mean by that? The way the staff communicates to each other, the way the staff communicates to the customer. It's really about how the staff treats the residents and other staff members. That's culture. It's not... I think a lot of people think about it being the furniture that you have in your clubhouse, or you mentioned earlier about allowing your staff to have casual Fridays. I've seen a lot that are allowing, staff members to bring pets into the clubhouse and that kind of thing. But it's really about how we treat people. And in the book, you talk about, this culture being cultivated and not created. And so I just wanted to kind of ask what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think you just put it, you hit it right on the head. I don't think culture can be fabricated, right? And I have my own opinions. That's a whole nother podcast, but I have my opinions about, the way that you kind of present yourself when you're in the office, right? And, or, how presentation is key. And I may not win the crowd favorite, but I'm not the biggest fan of casual Fridays and just doing casual Fridays, because, first of all, it's kind of socialized as something that should be done. It's casual Friday. Everybody knows what casual Friday is. And that's a form of culture, right? You had just mentioned it. But I don't think those small little nuggets is what defines culture, right? If you want to establish a culture of hardworking people, Wes, you said it, it's about how you treat people. If you want to establish a culture of somebody who's hardworking, give those positive reinforcements for your staff as they are working hard, right? If they do something that's absolutely phenomenal, fantastic, right? And you want to recognize that, do it. Celebrate them publicly, right? If they do something that's, not so great, then, reprimand them privately, right? But celebrate those successes, and then hard work will start to become a part of your culture, right? Or, self-sufficiency, right? If you want to create a culture of self-sufficiency where your community assistants aren't constantly just reaching out to you, calling you, oh, somebody's on the phone for you, Susie, the community manager. Oh, what do they want? They wanted to know what our parking fee is, right? Hey, you can answer that. You can answer that just like any manager, right? But, as the manager or any level of, upper management, as we continue to grow, we have to start to cultivate that self-sufficiency, recognize it, praise that self-sufficiency as it's happening. And, if in those moments where they're like, hey, they want to ask me about a parking fee, you have to stop them in their tracks right then and there and start to create this kind of DNA that becomes part of who your staff is. Not just every Friday they just wear a t-shirt and jeans to the office, right? They start to work harder. They start to believe in everything that's going on, not because it's Monday and you bring in donuts, but because we know that here at this property, we work hard and we do this and we believe in this, right? It's part of our culture. It's who we are now. I don't know. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. It's just, and the thing that keeps coming to my mind is just intentionality. And
Absolutely.
I think, that's what's so key for folks that are site managers, and it's not just the site manager. I think it's also very much the maintenance supervisor that have got to be leading, that, and, really just, reminding people, I tell CEOs all the time, they're not the chief executive officer. They're the chief repeating officer. They've got to be repeating this stuff over and over and over again. Cause
absolutely.
I think, what is it like? You got to hear something 16 times before you know it or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just it. And you think about the turnover that we have with a lot of our staff, just because a lot of them are college students and they're part-time. You've got to do it even more. It's just something that you've got to be intentional about. So, I probably need to wrap up here a little bit, but I want to, I want to brag on you a little bit, just because you kind of hinted to it a little bit earlier, but you've been working on a property that I'm actually in charge of asset management for. And, and you've done just a fantastic job there. I can't, for those, if there's any owners or folks that are, above the site level that, maybe you've got a property that's struggling from a leasing standpoint, get in touch with both Willie and his partner, Victoria, that over at Empower PMC. What they've been able to do has just been incredible. So,
I appreciate
for me personally, it was a tier 1 market where there was a lot of extra inventory being developed, which I still don't understand. But, this property hasn't been able to get, out of the 80s for the past 2 years. And we just said, look, if we're going to do something different, or expect different results, we've got to do something different, or otherwise we're just living out that, definition of insanity. And said, look, it's time to bring, Willie and Victoria in, and you guys have just blown it away. And I appreciate what you've been able to do, not just from the standpoint of, I think we're, a good 15, 20 points ahead year over year on our pre-leasing at that property. And I don't want to just thank you for that standpoint, but I can also see with the staff, there's been a huge mind shift that's happened there as well. And it all comes down to your leadership. So folks, if you're out there, you've got a site that's been struggling, be it from just they need a spark or maybe they need a mind shift. I can't endorse Willie and his company enough for that. So thanks for that personally. And then also thanks just for, being who you are. And of course, thanks for spending the time with us today. So the book is releasing. You can get it on Amazon. Where else can folks follow you, Willie, if they want to get these little nuggets of knowledge and wisdom and motivation?
Absolutely. Well, me personally, my name is everywhere. Instagram, it's where there is _will_ there's a way. But Empower PMC is just about everywhere. LinkedIn, William Butler. Facebook, Willie Butler. You could just, it's just my name, right? So yeah, follow me on, pretty much any handle, under my first and last name, and we'll connect. You follow me, I'll follow you back. But most important, follow Empower PMC on LinkedIn. That's where all the fun happens.
Well, Willie, thanks so much again for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you more. And thanks for all the work that you're doing to make student housing better.
I love it. Thank you for having me, Wes.
Well, guys, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that. If you haven't been a part of our MEMO web series, we're going to bring it back in September. At least that's the plan. I think we're going to, I'll be honest, it was a lot of work. I think we're going to switch this to, in May, we did a monthly format versus a weekly format. And but stay tuned for that. We're also planning on making an announcement sometime over the summer about bringing back live events. We just recently did a webinar with UForce where they were launching a new annual report. If you missed that, it was on marketing, new developments, and renovations. Go out to our YouTube channel and check that out. We had a fantastic panel. But I think we had about 80 people that attended the live webinar, and like I said, it's out there on our YouTube channel now. If you want to go check that out, I would highly suggest anybody that's going to be working on a new development go and check that out. It's got some great information in it. And but I polled the audience to find out if if they were ready for live events, and 100% were I'm past ready for live events. So I think we're going to look at launching something either in fourth quarter or first quarter of 2022. So stay tuned to that. And the best way you can get announcements for that is to make sure that you join the SHI community. For those of you that don't know, we created our website, and Gretta was very instrumental in doing this, to also include a member forum that we call the SHI community, where you can post everything from, hey, what is it that people are doing with, services like Valley Trash, or, you can give your experience on things like vector travel, right? And so it's a huge resource for things like that. Plus, you can put job posts and really anything about student housing that you want to talk about there. But additionally, once you're a member of that, you get email notifications and things as it relates to events that we're going to be doing. I'm also going to be at, and Gretta, you'll be there as well, at Interface Student Housing.
That is correct.
And we'll be doing a live podcast there as well. It is a closed door event, and if you want to attend, shoot me an email. If we've got room, I'll make sure that you can be there for that. And there will obviously be more news on that in the weeks to come. But Gretta, thanks so much for joining us. I can't wait to have some more discussions with you. We've got to do something pretty soon on sales training. It's been something that's been really, really relevant to a lot of things I've been working on. And I'm looking forward to having that discussion with you at some point.
Oh, I'm very excited by this. Okay. And I'm excited to see you in real life. So, hey, see you next month.
Even though we live 45 minutes from each other, we'll see each other in Austin next month.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like this.
All right, guys, take care, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.